Commander Jake Harrison stood at the center of the bridge, watching the stars drift past the main screen. The UES Liberty had been traveling through empty space for 3 weeks now, heading toward the outer edge of known territory, it was supposed to be a routine survey mission, checking star systems that might hold new worlds for human colonies. Jake was tired. They all were. Space was mostly empty, and survey work was mostly boring. His crew had run the same scans on dozens of dead rocks and gas giants. Nothing interesting, nothing dangerous, nothing worth writing home about. That changed when Communications Officer Lisa Grant looked up from her station with wide eyes. "Commander, I'm picking up something strange," she said, her voice tight with confusion. "It's a transmission, but it's not from any human ship." Jake walked over to her station. "What kind of transmission?" "It's weak, sir. Very weak. And it's in Galactic standard, but whoever is sending it doesn't speak it very well." Lisa pressed her earpiece closer and frowned. "Sir, I think it's a distress call." The bridge went quiet. In 30 years of space travel, humans had never received a distress call from aliens. They had met a few other species at trading posts and space stations, but those contacts had been brief and formal. Most aliens seemed to think humans were too violent and unpredictable to deal with. "Put it on speakers," Jake ordered. The voice that filled the bridge was high and musical, but filled with terror. It spoke in broken Galactic standard, mixing words with sounds that might have been sobs. "Please, anyone, help us. They are coming again. We cannot fight them. Our ships are not for war. Please, if anyone hears this, we are in the Calera system. Coordinates follow. They are taking our children. Please help us before they take them all." The message repeated 3 times, then cut to static. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Lisa, did you get those coordinates?" "Yes, sir." "The Calera system is about 4 days away at maximum jump speed." "What do we know about that?" System Navigator Bill Carter checked his charts. "It's not on our survey list, sir. According to Galactic records, it's empty space. No inhabited worlds, no trade routes, nothing." "Then what are they doing there?" Jake asked, but he already knew the answer. They were hiding. Medical Officer Ben Taylor spoke up from his station. "Commander, I've been studying the vocal patterns in that transmission. Based on the stress indicators and speech patterns, whoever sent that message was genuinely terrified." "This isn't a fake distress call," Jake nodded slowly. He had served in the military for 20 years before joining the Survey Corps. He knew the sound of real fear when he heard it. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "the transmission is repeating. Same message, same coordinates, but it's getting weaker. I think their equipment is failing." Chief Engineer Tony Blake looked up from his console. "Commander, if we're going to help them, we need to decide now. The Liberty isn't a warship. We've got mining lasers and a few torpedo tubes for clearing asteroids, but that's about it. We also don't know who they are," added Security Chief Don Murphy. "Could be pirates, could be something worse." Jake stared at the main screen, thinking, the smart thing to do would be to report this to Earth Command and let them decide what to do. But Earth Command was 3 weeks away, and it would take them months to organize a proper response. By then, whoever was asking for help would probably be dead. "Lisa, can you clean up that transmission anymore? I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." Lisa worked at her station for several minutes, running the message through filters and translation programs. When she looked up, her face was pale. "Sir, I was able to separate some of the background noise. There are sounds of weapons, fire, and screaming. And sir, some of those voices sound very young." The bridge fell silent again. Jake closed his eyes and thought about his own daughter back on Earth. She was safe in school, probably complaining. About homework or boys, these alien children weren't safe. No? They were being hunted by someone who thought children were worth stealing. "What's our weapon status?" Jake asked. "We have 6 mining lasers that could be reconfigured for combat," Dan reported. 12 asteroid-clearing torpedoes that pack a decent punch. "And we've got small arms for the crew, though I'm not sure how effective human weapons would be against aliens." Navigator Bill Carter pulled up a star chart. "Sir, if we jump to the Calera system, we'll be completely cut off from any support. The nearest human outpost is 3 weeks away. How many crew do we have aboard?" 43, sir, Dan answered. Mostly scientists and engineers. Only 8 of us have military training.
Jake
Looked around the bridge at his crew. They were good people, brave people, but they had signed up for survey work, not combat. He had no right to ask them to risk their lives for strangers. I need to be completely honest with all of you, he said. This could be a trap. It could be a suicide mission. We could jump into that system and find ourselves facing a fleet of hostile aliens with weapons we can't even imagine. Anyone who wants to object to this course of action should speak up now. Navigator Bill Carter was the first to respond. Sir, I've got kids back home too. If someone was threatening them, I'd want strangers to help if they could. Those people asked for help, Lisa added. They're scared and they're dying, and we might be the only ones who heard their call. One by one, the rest of the crew voiced their agreement. Even the youngest member of the crew, Ensign Amy Peterson, nodded firmly when Jake looked at her. All right then, Jake said, feeling proud and terrified at the same time. Bill, set course for the Calera system. Lisa, keep monitoring that transmission. And let me know if anything changes. Dan, I want everyone armed and ready for combat. Tony, see what you can do about turning our mining equipment into weapons. Sir, Ben said quietly, what if we can't help them? What if we're too late? Jake thought about that for a moment. Then at least they'll know that someone heard their call. Someone cared enough to try. The Liberty turned away from its planned course and jumped toward the unknown. In the empty space behind them, other ships might have followed different routes, made safer choices. But the crew of the Liberty had heard children crying for help, and that was enough. 4 days later, they would drop out of hyperspace into a nightmare. They would see things that would haunt their dreams forever. They would fight a battle that would change the galaxy. But for now, they traveled through the darkness toward the sound of fear, carrying nothing but hope and the determination to do what was right. The stars watched them go, silent and distant, unaware that they were witnessing the moment when humanity stepped onto the galactic stage, not as explorers or traders, but as protectors. In the Calera system, alien children huddled. In the dark corners of broken ships, waiting for rescue or death. They didn't know that help was coming. They didn't know that the call for aid they had sent into the void had reached the one species in the galaxy that would rather die than ignore a cry for help. They were about to learn what it meant to have humanity as an ally. The Liberty dropped out of hyperspace into Chaos Commander. Jake Harrison gripped the arms of his command chair as the main screen filled with the wreckage of what had once been a peaceful convoy. Dozens of alien ships drifted through space like broken toys, their hulls torn open and bleeding atmosphere into the void. Some were still burning from the inside, casting an orange glow against the darkness of space. My God, whispered Navigator Bill Carter. Jake had seen destruction before, during his military service, but this was different. These weren't warships that had died in battle. These were civilian vessels, family ships, designed for carrying people from one world to another. He could see gardens through the broken windows of one ship, or what had been gardens before. The air rushed out into space. Report, Jake ordered, his voice steady, despite the sick feeling in his stomach. Communications. Officer Lisa Grant worked frantically at her station. I'm reading debris from at least 30 vessels, sir. Some are completely destroyed. Others are just badly damaged. I'm picking up life signs from several ships, but they're very weak. What about the attackers? Security Chief Dan Murphy studied his tactical display. Unknown contacts, sir. I count 28 hostile vessels in the system, or smaller, than the alien civilian ships. But they look fast and heavily armed. Are they moving toward us? Not yet, sir. They seem to be focused on the damaged ships. They're sending boarding parties to several vessels. Jake felt his jaw clench. Whatever was happening here, the attackers weren't finished with their victims yet. Sir? Lisa called out urgently. I'm receiving a transmission from one of the damaged ships. It's the same voice from the distress call. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers was weaker now, filled with pain and despair. Please, human ship, you must leave this place. The Vorthok will kill you too. We are grateful you came, but there are too many of them. Save yourselves. Human ship. This is Commander Jake Harrison of the UES Liberty. We received your distress call, and we're here to help. What is your situation? There was a long pause, then the alien voice returned, shaking with surprise. You came. You actually came. I am Keeper Zala of the Kalari refugee fleet. Commander, we are dying. The Vorthok have been hunting us for months. They take our young ones and kill the adults who try to protect them. How many survivors do you have? Perhaps 300, scattered across 7 ships. But Commander, you must understand, the Vorthok are slave raiders. They have been doing this for generations. They will not negotiate. They will not show mercy. Jake looked at his tactical display. 28 enemy ships against 1 human survey vessel. The smart thing to do would be to retreat and call for help. Help was weeks away, and these people would be dead long before then. Keeper Zala, we're going to get you out of here. Can your ship still fly? 3 of them can make short jumps, but they are badly damaged. The others are dead in space. Understood. We're coming to assist. Jake cut the transmission and turned to his crew. Dan, what are we facing? Based on their ship designs, I'd say the Vorthok are a warrior species. Their vessels are built for speed and firepower, not exploration or trade. They've got us outnumbered badly. Tony, what can you tell me about our weapons? Chief Engineer Tony Blake looked up from his console. I've been working on the mining. Lasers since we jumped. They'll cut through most hulls, but they're not designed for ship-to-ship combat. The asteroid torpedoes will work, but we only have 12 of them. That's not enough for 28 ships. No, sir, it's not. Jake stared at the main screen, watching as small Vorthok ships attached themselves to the damaged Kalari vessels like parasites. He thought about the alien children hiding somewhere in those broken ships, waiting for death or something worse. Sir, Medical Officer Ben Taylor said quietly, I'd like permission to board one of the damaged ships. These people need medical help, and I want to understand what we're dealing with. That's too dangerous, Ben. With respect, sir, this whole mission is too dangerous. But if we're going to help these people, we need to know more about them. Jake considered this. Ben was right. They needed information. All right, but you take a full security team. Dan, I want you personally leading the boarding party. 10 minutes. Later, Don Murphy and his team were crossing space in the Liberty's only shuttle, heading for the nearest damaged Kalari ship. Jake watched their progress on the tactical display, knowing that any moment the Vorthok might notice them. Commander, Lisa said, I'm picking up Vorthok communications. They're using an older form of Galactic Standard, but I can understand most of it. What are they saying? Lisa's face went pale. They're discussing cargo prices, sir. They're talking about the Kalari survivors like they're goods to be sold. Jake felt anger building in his chest, cold and dangerous. Anything else? Yes, sir. They've noticed us. On the main screen, one of the Vorthok vessels broke away from the convoy and headed toward the Liberty. It was smaller than the human ship, but looked fast and mean, covered in weapon ports and sensor arrays. Coming transmission, Lisa reported. Let's hear it. The voice that came through the speakers was harsh and guttural, speaking heavily accented Galactic Standard. Human vessel, this is War Leader Krex of the Vorthok hunting fleet. You are in a combat zone. State your business or be destroyed. Jake. A CTIV, a TED, the communication system. This is Commander Jake Harrison of the United Earth ship Liberty. We are responding to a distress call from the Kalari refugees. Withdraw your forces immediately and release all prisoners. There was a pause. Then the Vorthok leader began to laugh. It was an ugly sound, full of cruelty and amusement. Humans, I have heard of your species. You are new to the galaxy, yes. You do not understand how things work here. These Kalari are prey animals. They exist to serve stronger species. If you wish to purchase some of them, we can negotiate. But do not interfere with our hunt. I'm not here to negotiate, Jake replied, his voice deadly calm. I'm here to save innocent lives, and this is your only warning. Release the prisoners and leave this system immediately. The Vorthok leader laughed again. One small human ship against the might of the Vorthok fleet. You are either very brave or very stupid. Perhaps both. Very well, human.
When we are finished,
With the Kaleri, we will add your crew to our cargo. Human slaves bring good prices in the outer systems. The transmission cut off, and Jake felt something cold and angry settle in his chest. These weren't warriors fighting for honor or territory. They were predators who hunted families and sold children. Sir Dan's voice came through the cum from the Kalari ship. You need to see this, report Dan. Commander, these people, they're like nothing I've ever seen. They're small, maybe 4 feet tall, with fur like deer and big eyes. They're completely peaceful, sir. They don't even understand the concept of violence and the things the Vorthok did to them. Dan's voice trailed off, and Jake could hear the anger and disgust in it. How bad is it? Bad, sir. Very bad. Duh. Survivors are mostly elderly adults. Younger ones are gone, and from what the survivors are telling me, the Vorthok consider their children a delicacy. Jake closed his eyes and felt something break inside him. These aliens weren't soldiers or rivals. They were refugees, families fleeing a dying world, and they had run into monsters. Dan, get back to the ship. Now, sir, what are your orders? Opened his eyes and looked at the tactical display. 28 Vorthok ships, all of them armed and dangerous. The Liberty was one ship with mining equipment and a crew of scientists. But the Vorthok had made a mistake. They had threatened children. Battle stations, Jake ordered. All hands to combat positions. Tony, I want every weapon system we have online and ready. Lisa, send a message to the Kaleri survivors. Tell them to prepare for emergency evacuation. Sir Bill Carter said quietly, what's the plan? Jake stared at the Vorthok ships on the screen, thinking about alien children being sold in slave markets, about peaceful families murdered by predators who laughed about it. We're going to teach the Vorthok why humans are classified as a death world. Species, he said. And we're going to make sure they never forget the lesson. The first shot came from the VORTH. Jake had decided that one human ship was more of an annoyance than a threat. His vessel fired a plasma burst designed to disable the Liberty's engines and leave them helpless. It was meant to be a warning shot, a way to show the humans their place in the galaxy's food chain. Commander. Jake Harrison watched the energy blast streak toward his ship and felt something cold settle in his mind. These aliens thought they were. Dealing with prey, they were wrong. Evasive maneuvers, Jake ordered calmly. Return fire. The Liberty twisted away from the plasma burst with surprising grace for such a large ship. Navigator Bill Carter had spent years dodging asteroids and solar flares, and a Vorthok energy weapon was actually slower than most of the hazards he was used to avoiding. The ship's mining lasers, lastily reconfigured for combat, lanced out across space. They were designed to cut through solid rock and metal, or Vorthok armor plating might as well have been paper. The first laser beam punched clean through Krex's ship from bow to stern, cutting it in half. The 2 pieces tumbled away from each. Other, trailing atmosphere and debris, there were no escape pods. Direct hit, reported weapons specialist Kate Adams, her voice tight with satisfaction. Enemy vessel destroyed. The Vorthok fleet paused, clearly not expecting such an immediate and devastating response. In their experience, most species tried to negotiate or flee when faced with superior numbers. They had never encountered humans before. Incoming transmission from the Vorthok fleet, Communications Officer Lisa Grant announced. Let's hear it. Different voice came through the speakers, older and more cautious than Krex had been. Human ship. This is Fleet Commander Gorth. You have made a grave mistake. We are 27 ships. You are 1. Surrender now, and we will make your deaths quick. Jake activated the CUM system. This is Commander Harrison. You have 30 seconds to release all prisoners and leave this system. After that, we consider you enemy combatants and will respond accordingly. You cannot be serious. 27 against 1. 26, Jake corrected quietly. You're down 1 ship already. There was a long pause, then Gorth's voice returned, filled with rage. Kill them all. Leave nothing but debris. The Vorthok fleet moved as one, converging on the Liberty from multiple directions. Their plan was simple, and had worked countless times before: surround the enemy, overwhelm them with firepower, then pick through the wreckage for anything valuable. They had never fought humans before. Chief Engineer Tony Blake had spent the last hour working on the ship's systems, not just converting mining equipment into weapons, but redesigning how the Liberty fought. Human ships were built to survive. In environments that would kill most other species, they had redundant systems, backup power sources, and armor designed to withstand the crushing pressure of gas giant atmospheres. The first wave of Vorthok. Fire struck the Liberty shields and scattered harmlessly. The second wave penetrated. The shields but barely scratched the hull. The Vorthok weapons were designed to fight other aliens, species that built ships for comfort and efficiency. They had never encountered a vessel built by a species that considered war a hobby. Shields. Holding at 80%, Tony reported. Hull integrity at 96%? These weapons can't even dent us. Jake allowed himself a small smile. Kate, light them up. The Liberty's response was devastating. The mining lasers, now operating at full power, reached out across space like the fingers of an angry god. Each beam could cut through a Vorthok ship in seconds, and Kate Adams had learned to use them like a surgeon uses a scalpel. 3. Vorthok vessels exploded in the first 10 seconds of the engagement. 2 more lost their engines and began spinning helplessly through space. A 6th ship took a direct hit to its weapon systems and went silent. But the real terror began when Security Chief Don Murphy led his boarding parties into action. The Liberty carried 2 shuttles and 4 maintenance pods, small craft designed for routine repairs and cargo transfer. Dan had loaded them with every crew member who had military training, armed them with human weapons, and sent them after the Vorthok ships that were attached to Kalari vessels. The first boarding party hit a Vorthok raider that was in the process of loading Kalari children into cargo containers. The airlocks sealed, the human soldiers entered, and 3 minutes later, the ship was silent. Boarding Party 1 to Liberty. Dan's voice came through the com, steady and professional. Ship secured. 23 Kalari children recovered alive. No enemy survivors? Jake had to ask. Dan, what happened to the Vorthok crew? There was a pause before Dan answered. They resisted, sir. We dealt with them accordingly. Similar reports came in from the other boarding parties. The Vorthok, accustomed to fighting species that considered violence distasteful, found themselves facing soldiers from a world where conflict was a way of life. The humans moved through the enemy ships like wolves through a flock of sheep. Efficient and merciless, Lieutenant Amy Peterson, the youngest member of the crew, led a team onto a Vorthok command ship, which found the ship's captain torturing a Kalari adult, trying to force information about other refugee fleets. The captain looked up as the humans entered, expecting to intimidate them as he had intimidated so many others. Amy shot him twice in the chest, without saying a word. Back on the Liberty. The main battle continued. The Vorthok fleet, originally 28 ships, was down to 15 and falling fast. Their weapons couldn't penetrate human armor. Their tactics didn't work against human unpredictability, and their morale was breaking as ship after ship went silent. Sir, Kate reported, the remaining Vorthok vessels are trying to retreat. Jake watched the tactical display as the surviving raiders attempted to break off and flee toward the edge of the system. Some of them were probably carrying Kalari prisoners. None of them could be allowed to escape. Pursue and destroy, he ordered. No survivors. The Liberty gave chase, her engines pushing her to speeds that would have torn apart most civilian vessels. But she wasn't a civilian ship anymore. She was a predator, hunting the hunters, and she was very good at it. The next 20 minutes were less a battle than an execution. The Vorthok ships, built for raids against defenseless targets, couldn't outrun or outfight a human vessel designed to operate in the depths of space. One by one, they died. The last Vorthok ship to die was Fleet, Commander Gorth's flagship. Kate's final mining laser shot cut through its bridge, and Jake watched on the main screen as the enemy commander's vessel broke apart in a shower of sparks and debris. When it was over, 28 Vorthok ships had become wreckage floating in space. The Liberty hung motionless among the debris, her hull scarred but intact, her crew victorious but sobered by what they had done. "Sir," Lisa reported quietly, "I'm receiving transmissions from the Kaleri survivors. They want to thank us." Jake nodded, but he felt no satisfaction in the victory. The Vorthok had deserved their fate, but that didn't make killing easier. It just made it necessary. "Don, what's the status on the rescue operations?" "We've recovered 437 Kalari survivors, sir. It's mostly children and elderly adults. Medical Officer Taylor says most of them will survive, but they'll need long-term care. What about the Vorthok prisoners?" There was a long pause before Dan answered. "There are no Vorthok prisoners, sir." Jake closed his eyes. He should probably feel bad about that, but he didn't. The Vorthok had been slave raiders, child killers, monsters who laughed about their crimes. The galaxy was a better place without them. "Sir," Communications Officer Lisa Grant said softly, "I'm picking up other transmissions. Word of what happened here is spreading fast. Other species are talking about it." "What are they saying?" "Some are scared, sir. They're calling us dangerous, unpredictable. But others are asking for help. Species that have been hiding from raiders and slavers for generations. They want to know if we'll help them too." Jake looked at the main screen, where Kaleri children were being transferred to the Liberty's medical bay. They were safe now, but there were others out there who weren't. Other families being hunted, other children being stolen, other innocents dying while the galaxy looked the other way. "Send a message on all frequencies," Jake ordered. "Tell them that humanity has heard their calls for help. Tell them that we're coming." The Liberty turned away from the battlefield and began the long journey home, carrying survivors and a message that would change everything. Behind them, the wreckage of the Vorthok fleet drifted in space, a warning to anyone who thought humans were just another weak species to be preyed upon. The galaxy had just learned that Earth's children had fangs. The news traveled faster than light. Within hours of the Liberty's victory, every communication network in the galaxy was buzzing with reports of what had happened in the Kalera system. 28 Vorthok ships destroyed by a single human vessel. No survivors from the raider fleet. Over 400 Kalari refugees rescued. Ambassador Helen Carter was in the middle of a routine trade meeting when her aide burst into the conference room at the Galactic Council headquarters. The Zalani trade representative stopped mid-sentence as the young man whispered urgently in Helen's ear. Helen's face went pale, then red with anger. "Excuse me," she said to the assembled aliens. "I need to make some calls." She was barely back. In her office, when the first angry delegation arrived, the Vorthok ambassador, a massive creature, covered in scales and scars, towered over her desk while his 3 bodyguards stood menacingly behind him. "Ambassador Carter," he growled in heavily, accented Galactic standard, "your people have committed an act of war against the Vorthok Dominion. 28 ships, hundreds of brave warriors, murdered by human terrorists." Helen looked up at him without flinching. She had been dealing with alien politicians for 5 years, and very few of them impressed her anymore. "Ambassador Croth, are you referring to the incident where your people were attacking refugee ships and kidnapping children? Those were legitimate salvage operations? The Kalari vessels were in distress, and we were providing assistance in exchange for reasonable compensation." "By reasonable compensation, you mean slavery?" Croth's eyes narrowed. "Your species is new to galactic civilization, Ambassador. You do not understand the complexities of interstellar law. The strong have always ruled the weak. This is the natural order." Helen stood up slowly. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but something in her expression made the massive Vorthok take a step backward. "Let me explain something to you about human law," she said quietly. "When someone hurts children, we kill them. Someone enslaves innocent people, we kill them. When someone laughs about it afterward, we make sure they die slowly. You cannot threaten a Galactic Council member." "I'm not threatening anyone," Helen replied calmly. "I'm explaining facts. Your people attacked refugees." "Our people responded. Your fleet is gone. These are simply things that happened." "Why before?" Croth could respond. Helen's aide announced another visitor. Council Chairman Vex, a tall, thin alien with gray skin and large black eyes, entered the office with his usual careful dignity. Ambassador Carter, Vex said in his soft, precise voice, "We need to discuss recent events. The Council is very concerned about human actions in the Calaras system. What concerns you, Chairman? That we saved lives, or that we did it efficiently? The concern is that your people acted without authorization from any galactic authority. The Vorthok have filed formal complaints claiming your ship attacked them without provocation." Helen activated her desk display, showing recordings from the Liberty's sensors. "Would you like to see the Vorthok salvage operations? I have footage of them loading Kalari children into cargo containers. Very educational." Chairman Vex studied the recordings in silence. His species, the Nexori, were among the oldest members of the Galactic Council, known for their careful neutrality and dislike of conflict. After several minutes, he spoke. "These images are disturbing, but they do not change the legal situation. The Vorthok claim they were conducting legitimate business according to their cultural practices. Their cultural practices include eating children. That is their internal affair." Helen stared at the chairman for a long moment. "You know what? Vex, I don't think we're going to agree on this." Before the chairman could respond, Helen's communication system chimed with an urgent message. She read it quickly, and her expression changed. "Gentlemen, I'm afraid you'll have to excuse me. I've just received word that 3 more human ships have responded to distress calls in other systems." Ambassador Croth leaned forward threateningly. "What distress calls?" Helen smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "It seems word of our willingness to help is spread. The U's Defiance is currently dealing with some organ harvesters who are attacking the Tethian colonies. The U's Valor is having a conversation with some corporate raiders in Quellian space. And the U.S. Justice just arrived in the Zephyrian system, where someone has been harvesting crystalline beings for jewelry. This is intolerable." Croth roared. "Your species cannot simply appoint itself as the galaxy's police force." "Watch us," Helen replied quietly. 3 days later, the reports started coming in. The Defiance had destroyed an entire fleet of organ harvesters and rescued 2,000 Tethian civilians. The Valor had convinced a major corporation to withdraw from Quellian space by the simple expedient of blowing up their mining platforms. The Justice had ended the systematic extinction of the Zephyrians by turning 3 raider fleets into expanding clouds of plasma. But the real shock came when Admiral Rick Stone's message reached the Galactic Council. Helen was in another emergency session when the transmission arrived. The council chamber, a vast circular room designed to accommodate dozens of different species, fell silent as Admiral Stone's image appeared on the main screen. He was a tall, gray-haired man in a crisp military uniform, with the kind of eyes that had seen too much war and weren't impressed by diplomatic niceties. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded fleets in battle. "Members of the Galactic Council," he began, "I am Admiral Rick Stone, commanding officer of the United Earth Colonial Fleet. I'm sending this message to inform you of a change in human policy regarding galactic affairs." Chairman Vex leaned forward in his seat. "This transmission was not scheduled or authorized." Admiral Stone continued as if he hadn't heard the interruption. "For the past week, human ships have responded to multiple distress calls from species under attack by various raiders, slavers, and corporate exploitation forces. In each case, we have eliminated the threat and protected the innocent." Murmurs of anger and concern rippled through the council chamber. Several ambassadors were speaking urgently to their aides. "We have received over 300 additional requests for assistance from species throughout the galaxy. Species that have been suffering in silence while the Galactic Council debates procedure and protocol. Species that have been told that their destruction is simply the natural order of things." Ambassador Croth stood up, his massive frame shaking with rage. "Humans have no authority to act as they please throughout the galaxy." Admiral Stone's image turned toward the Vorthok ambassador. "Ambassador, your people attacked refugee ships and kidnapped children. That authority comes from the barrel of a gun, and we have bigger guns. This is exactly the kind of violent thinking that makes humans dangerous. called out the Trilaxian ambassador. "Your species solves every problem with violence." "That's not true," Admiral Stone replied calmly. "We solve every problem with the appropriate level of violence. Sometimes that's none at all. Sometimes it's total annihilation. The choice is usually up to the other party." Chairman Vex tried to restore order. "Admiral Stone, human actions are creating instability throughout the galaxy. The Council requires your government to cease these unauthorized military operations immediately." Admiral Stone was quiet for a moment, then smiled. It was not a reassuring expression. "Chairman, I've just received authorization from Earth Command to expand our protection operations. We're deploying our entire colonial fleet to safeguard any species that requests our assistance. We estimate we can have ships in every major system within 6 months." The council chamber erupted in chaos. Ambassadors were shouting, aides were running between seats carrying urgent messages, and Chairman Vex was frantically calling for order. Through it all, Admiral Stone's image remained calm and steady on the main screen. "The age of might makes right is ending," he said quietly, and somehow his voice carried over all the noise. "Any species that preys on the innocent will face the full response of the human fleet. We are no longer observers in galactic affairs. We are participants, and we play for keeps." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Helen Carter gathered her papers and stood to leave. As she reached the door, Chairman Vex called after her. "Ambassador, surely your government will reconsider this aggressive stance. The economic and political disruption will be enormous." Helen paused and looked back at the assembled aliens. Representatives of species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, that had built vast empires on the suffering of weaker races, that had convinced themselves that cruelty was simply natural law. "Chairman," she said quietly, "my daughter asked me once why bad things happen to good people. I told her it was because good people sometimes don't fight back hard enough. We're done not fighting back." She left the council chamber and walked through corridors filled with frightened aliens, past guards who watched her with new respect and fear. Outside, human ships were already moving through space, carrying a simple message to anyone who would listen. The protectors had arrived. 6 months after the Liberty's first battle, the largest military fleet in galactic history assembled at the edge of Vorthok space. Admiral Rick Stone stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching as 300 human warships took their positions in perfect formation. Each ship represented months of frantic construction as every human world contributed to the effort. Colony ships had been converted into troop carriers. Cargo vessels now bristled with weapons. Even civilian craft had been modified to serve as support ships for the massive operation. But these weren't the same mining ships and survey vessels that had first answered alien distress calls. Human shipyards had been working around the clock, designing new classes of warships based on hard lessons learned in dozens of rescue operations. The ships that floated in space around the Vengeance were built for one purpose: to end the age of predators. Admiral Communications Officer Sarah Blake reported, "All ships report ready for action." General Knight confirms his Marines are prepared. For planetary operations, Commander Ross says her Special Forces teams are standing by. Admiral Stone nodded, studying the tactical display that showed not just his own fleet, but the enemy forces gathering to meet them. The Vorthok had spent 6 months calling in favors, hiring mercenaries, and threatening their allies. Over 500 ships now defended their homeworld, the largest force they had ever assembled. It wouldn't be enough. "Sir Intelligence Officer," Mark Taylor said quietly, "we're receiving final updates from our reconnaissance teams. The Vorthok have 47 slave processing facilities on their homeworld. Estimated prisoner population is over 2 million beings from 36 different species." Admiral Stone's jaw tightened. 2 million innocent beings, locked in cages, waiting to be sold to the highest bidder. Some were probably children who had been taken years ago and had given up hope of ever seeing home again. "Weapons status?" he asked. "All ships report full readiness, sir," replied Weapons Coordinator Linda Foster. "The new plasma cannons are online, torpedo tubes loaded, and fighter squadrons ready for launch." The Vengeance alone carried more firepower than the entire Vorthok fleet that had attacked the Kalari refugees, but she was just one ship among 300. And every single vessel in the human fleet had been designed by engineers who understood that sometimes the only way to save lives was to take them. Admiral Sarah reported. Incoming transmission. From the Vorthok homeworld, put it through. The main screen filled with the image of Supreme War Chief Gorax, the military leader of the Vorthok Dominion. He was larger than most of his species, covered in battle scars that he wore like decorations. When he spoke, his voice carried the arrogance of someone who had never lost a fight. Human Admiral Gorax growled, "You have made a grave error coming here. This is Vorthok space, and you are not welcome. Turn your ships around and leave, or face the consequences." Admiral Stone stepped forward so the Vorthok leader could see him clearly. "Supreme War Chief Gorax, I am Admiral Rick Stone of the United Earth Colonial Fleet. You are in possession of 2 million beings who were taken from their homes against their will. You have exactly 1 hour to release all prisoners and surrender your fleet. After that, we will take them by force." Gorax laughed, the same ugly sound that war leader Krex had made 6 months ago in the Kelleris system. "You think you're 300? Ships can defeat the might of the Vorthok Empire. You have 500 vessels defending our homeworld, and we fight on our own territory." "Actually," Admiral Stone replied calmly, "I think 300 human ships can defeat 5,000 of yours, but we're about to find out. You humans think you are so superior because you won a few small battles against raiders, but today, you face the full power of the Vorthok military. Today, you learn why we have ruled this sector for 1,000 years. Admiral Stone was quiet for a moment, then smiled. It was the same expression he had worn when he announced humanity's intention to protect the galaxy, and it carried the same message. "War Chief, you've been ruling this sector for 1,000 years because nobody was strong enough to stop you. That changes today." The transmission cut off, and Admiral Stone turned to his crew. "All ships, battle stations. Operation Freedom is now active." The human fleet moved forward like a pack of wolves closing in on their prey. The ships stayed in tight formation, each one protecting the others, each crew ready to die for the mission they had all volunteered for. The Vorthok fleet met them at the edge of the system, confident in their numbers and experience. They had fought dozens of species over the centuries, and they had always won through superior firepower and ruthless tactics, but they had never fought humans. The battle began when a Vorthok heavy cruiser fired the first shot, a massive plasma burst aimed at the Vengeance. Admiral Stone watched the energy bolt streak toward his ship and felt no fear. Human vessels were built to survive in the depths of space, where a single mistake meant death. Vorthok weapons, designed to intimidate weaker species, were barely powerful enough to scratch their paint. The plasma burst struck the Vengeance's shields and scattered harmlessly. A dozen other Vorthok ships opened fire, their combined assault lighting up space like an artificial star. When the light faded, human fleet was undamaged and still advancing. "Return fire," Admiral Stone ordered quietly. The response was devastating. 300 human ships opened fire simultaneously, their weapons designed not just to destroy enemy vessels, but to send a message to anyone watching. Plasma cannons that could melt asteroids reached out across space. Torpedo salvos that could crack moons streaked toward their targets. Energy beams that could cut through the hulls of space stations lanced out like the fingers of an angry god. 50 Vorthok ships died in the first 10 seconds. "God," whispered Navigator John Miller, staring at the tactical display, as enemy contacts disappeared one after another. But the real shock came when the human fighters launched. Captain Lisa Ward led 3 squadrons of the newest human combat craft, ships that could dance between energy beams and strike like lightning. The pilots had trained in the asteroid fields around Earth, learning to fly through environments that would kill most aliens just from the stress. They tore through the Vorthok formation like sharks through a school of fish. Admiral Sarah reported, her voice tight with amazement. "Enemy fleet is breaking apart. They're trying to retreat. Pursue and destroy any ship that doesn't surrender immediately," Admiral Stone ordered. "General Knight, begin landing operations." what those prison facilities liberated within the hour. General Paul Knight had been planning this operation for months. His Marines were loaded in specially designed assault ships, ready to break through planetary defenses and free the prisoners below. They had trained for urban combat, hostage rescue, and dealing with enemies who used innocents as human shields. The first wave of landing craft broke through the Vorthok planetary defenses like they weren't there. General Knight himself led the assault on the largest prison complex, a massive facility that held over 300,000 beings from dozens of different species. The Vorthok guards fought desperately, but they were facing soldiers from a world where war was an art form. Within 20 minutes, the complex was secure and the prisoners were free. Similar scenes played out across the planet as human special forces teams led by Yi. Commander Nina Ross struck at smaller facilities. The Vorthok had built their empire on the suffering of others, but they had never faced an enemy that considered rescue operations a sacred duty by the end of the day. The Vorthok fleet was destroyed, and their homeworld was occupied by human forces. 2 million prisoners were free, and the slave trade that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was ended. But Admiral Stone wasn't finished. Standing on the bridge of the Vengeance, the defeated Vorthok homeworld spinning slowly beneath them, he activated the fleet communication system. His words would be broadcast not just to his own ships, but to every communication network in the galaxy. This is Admiral Rick Stone of the United Earth Colonial Fleet broadcasting from former Vorthok space. Today, the last major slave trading empire in this galaxy has fallen. 2 million innocent beings are free, and those who enslaved them have been brought to justice. He paused, looking out at the stars that held so many worlds, so many species still suffering under the rule of predators. But our work is not finished.
No?
There are still raiders in the outer systems, still corporations that treat sapient beings as property, still governments that rule through fear and cruelty. To all of them, we send this message. Your time is over. The broadcast continued, carried by quantum communication networks to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Any species that calls for help will find us. Any being that suffers under oppression has allies among the stars. We are humanity, and we stand watch over those who cannot protect themselves. In the months that followed, human ships would spread across the galaxy like guardians made of steel and fire. Pirates would flee at the sight of human flags. Slavers would abandon their trade rather than face human justice. Corporations would change their policies overnight rather than meet human marines in battle.